and do our best to doctor each other while we're all sick. Be terrible. Yeah.
They said the dead go quiet, but Leon's name returned like weather, low and heavy, rolling back over a town that had trained itself not to look up. And it began, as reckonings often do, with an envelope that did not announce itself. No crest, no flourish, just the weight of something that had decided it would no longer be ignored. Mary slid it open between a water bill and a charity circular and felt the kitchen tilt, because Clark County Probate Court is a phrase that steals the air from an honest room, and beneath it those cruelly steady words, Estate of Leon Brown, made the past walk in and sit down at her table. She read it once, twice, 5 times, the way a person checks a locked door they know is locked, and then the old voice message she had never deleted. Leon's voice, softer, wind-battered, asking her to hold on to the truth and not let anyone rewrite him, rose up from some drawer of memory and turned the skin on her arms to cold glass. She called Christine and heard not surprise, but a quiet that sounded like knowledge, felt the tremor of Janelle's crying down a telephone line, learned that Robin was not answering, which was not shocking so much as on brand because Robin had always grieved like a strategist, precise and private, stepping away from rooms at the exact second tears might make her untidy. And Mary remembered the memorial, the vehicle door slamming, the phone call in the car park, the way everyone had called it grief because they hadn't yet found a better word, motive. And now the letter sat on the countertop like an unexploded shell, daring her to breathe near it. The week folded in on itself, and on Friday the courthouse felt older than its bricks, tense with a hush that belonged to cathedrals and operating theaters. A clerk guided them into a side room where the chairs were too straight and the clock was unkind. Christine was already there, jaw set, hands braided together the way a person braids a rope to cross a canyon. Janelle looked as though night had emptied itself into her face. Robin came last, wrapped in black that was too perfect to be sorrow, and sat down without offering an eye to meet. The judge, the same one who had read the last will as if reading a weather report, lifted a folder and informed the room, in a tone that suggested patience had limits, that an anonymous packet had delivered an alternate will and letters dated 2 days before Leon died, and that for the moment, the business was authentication, not melodrama. Someone's breath caught, someone else muttered a prayer too small to save anyone. Robin said, inauthentic, with a quiver that betrayed the word. Mary told her she'd know a forgery if she saw one, and the gavel struck the air like a warning. Shot. When they spilled back into the corridor, a text struck Christine's phone. You don't know the whole story. Keep digging and you'll be sorry. And the corridor's paint seemed to cool by 10 degrees, because the living are never frightened of truth, only of what it insists upon saying about them. Over the weekend, Mary patrolled the house like a night watchman of her own memories, opened boxes that smelled of old birthdays and frost, found a school photograph of Leon with a message in blunt Sharpie. If they try to rewrite me, burn the ball. Script, and wondered when they had become a plural with edges. By Monday, the courtroom lamps hummed the way buildings hum when electricity knows it will be busy, and the judge, peering over half moons, announced preliminary verification. The handwriting was Leon's, the date aligned with his last week. The final page, signature, beneficiary, was missing, and the space where a name should be was blank, like a tooth knocked from a smile. Heads turned, as heads do when their owners already suspect where the light will fall, and Robin did not. Blink, but the flesh beneath her eyes tightened as if bracing for hail. Then the judge raised an email. Time stamped 3 days before the end. Need to make sure Robin can't override this. And Robin said fake because the alternative was to say caught. And Christine stood and told the court that Leon had warned her to keep Robin away from his things if anything went wrong. And Janelle said he'd told her too. And panic made a bright, brittle sound in the room. Somewhere at the back, Kody appeared like a shadow that had remembered its body. Arms folded, jaw locked, gaze fixed on the carpet as if trying to bore a hole straight through the floor into escape. And the gavel dismissed them for a recess. That rested no one. When they reconvened, Christine laid a spiral notebook on the table, the way one places a relic. Leon's name on the cover, pages crisscrossed with codes and symbols, names crushed to initials, swathes blacked out to protect. A man from his own home, while the judge summoned forensics to untangle it. And then the screens lit with the sort of evidence that is boring only to the guilty. Server logs, login attempts, IP addresses, stubborn as maths problems, each datum pointing a thin, relentless finger. The system said Robin had tried 11 times to climb through a dead man's passwords, and when asked why, she chose photographs as her alibi, and found the judge asking why photographs required medical history answers. Janelle recalled a funeral whisper, "Do you know Leon's computer password?" And the room understood that mourning had been a costume in which theft rehearsed. Devices were ordered surrendered, and Christine placed hers down, then Janelle, then Mary with a sigh like the end of a hymn, and Robin said privacy and learned that the law has a different dictionary for that word. In the car at lunch, the sky a sheet of pewter, Christine opened a long-ignored drive link Leon had sent and let the glow of a bedroom video lay a haunting across the upholstery. Leon, messy-haired and lucid, saying if you can see this, then something has gone wrong, saying he felt coerced, saying that someone who smiles too much when it's quiet is the one to watch. Christine said Robin and Mary did not argue, because some truths don't require punctuation. The judge admitted the clip. Leon's face took the room and said a sentence that was not angry enough to be theater, and not confused enough to be dismissed. If Robin says she didn't know, she's lying. And Robin called him paranoid, and the gavel's bark turned the air to order. The court dimmed again, and another recording bled across the wall. Long nights that felt like negotiations, burner emails, papers read without permission, a whisper about being outmaneuvered rather than defeated, and the judge's voice changed. Key, from probate to something with teeth. And when Robin broke, she did not break as expected. There were no apologies, only heat and accusation. He hated you. You were poison. And yet her hands shook in the manner of a person whose map has burst into flame. Christine produced another file, a porch light, a leather-bound book, Leon Calmer, younger by weeks, naming initials and connections, noting RB's midnight attempt to reverse an update. And Robin's sob came out in a shape that was less grief than physics, the sound a plan makes when it hits a wall. Kody remained back row and colorless while the judge said tomorrow forensics, tomorrow oaths. That night the nation found out, or thought it did, hashtags blooming like bruises, news, vans sprouting along the curb, and Tuesday dawned with theater lights upon a room that had been a family's private ruin. Forensics brought back the diary's core, a trust named in Leon's full initials, LBR, established without his authority, Robin as custodian on paper, for the family on her lips, for control on Christine's, and when the judge asked why the EI, good needed hiding, Robin's answer failed to arrive. The bailiff locked the doors that evening, and a woman nobody knew handed him an envelope that would make the judge look 10 years older in 24 hours. Inside, a letter and a memory. Card. By morning, the court had been reclassified. No longer polite probate, but civil fraud, obstruction, forensic everything. And the screen showed a banking app with a deposit that wore the figure of outrage. $175,000 from Leon's estate to a joint account in Robin and Kody's names, opened a fortnight after the funeral. Explain this, said the judge, and Robin's lips made a home for family again, and Christine stood with a fury that held to its vowels, and the USB answered for them all with a folder called backups, drafts and emails and counsel notes, and a line that crawled beneath the skin. Someone close had tried to roll back the changes from a suspicious address until the next layer peeled and revealed an offshore benevolence with a hymn book title, Pine Mesa Foundation for the Reconstruction of Family, its routing smiling the same numbers as that joint account. Kody tried a sentence about providing for the future and found Mary telling him he had not even found his way to a hospice bedside. The judge warned the heir to behave. Leon's voice rose from a final memo. They're making it difficult to keep going, and a silence settled that rescues no one. Cloud logs confirmed Robin's 11 attempts to be the ghost in a dead man's machine, and when asked why she was answering questions only a patient should know, she had no more words to spend. And then came the card's nastiest mercy. Hours of audio, some encrypted, some naked. One where Leon's voice asks how transferring his will to Robin protects anyone. And Robin's answer uses the word us the way empires do. The court placed Robin under forensic financial supervision. Kody stayed mute, and the room learned. Again that the sharpest wounds are the ones delivered by omission. Mary, hands trembling, produced a 5-line letter Leon had titled, "To Whoever Still Cares," quiet instructions on who to trust and where to place hope when a room insists you are wrong about your own life. And the judge read it privately and aloud and into the minutes, and something in the room shifted from spectacle to sacrament. When they rose to leave, no one moved, because sometimes you do not know how to stand. In a world where truth has finally said itself out loud, and so they sat in that stunned stillness, the sort of hush that lingers after lightning, when the door opened and the past arrived, wearing sensible shoes and a professional smile. Dr. Mia Adler, carrying a battered leather folder the way one carries a lantern into a storeroom of broken things, took the oath, folded her hands, and told the court in a voice as soft as wool and as exact as a scalpel that Leon had feared not death so much as erasure, that his terror was not of endings, but of being rewritten while still breathing. She spoke of 2 years of careful sessions, of journals where feelings were mapped like isobars on a pressure chart, spikes appearing on days when Robin's calls came through, troughs when distance offered him a brief reprieve, and she said, very calmly, the way truth is best delivered, that his anxieties were not hallucinations of a failing body, but survival instincts of a cornered mind, and the graph she laid before the judge made a liar of the easy narratives. Color-coded peaks clustered. Around conflicts, notes in Leon's tidy hand describing pressure to reconsider, unity used as leverage, silence weaponized as virtue. Kody shifted as if his chair were suddenly made of nettles. Mary stared at the floor and blinked too fast. Christine's breath went ragged in the back of her throat. And when the judge asked whether Leon had contemplated harm, Dr. Adler shook her head, saying he had planned for advocacy, even relocation, that he had been making lists rather than farewells, and that he had left with her an envelope marked worst case, to be opened only if coercion colored the air. The paper was produced, the seal broken, and the court heard a dead man's instructions read in the living tense. If Robin or my father challenge this, understand they are guarding themselves, not me. Check transfers, check phones, trust Christine. A sound moved through the benches, something between a prayer and a sob, and Robin rose like a struck match, shouting paranoia into a room that had grown tired of that word, while the judge's look placed her back in her chair and reminded, the wall's what order means. Then came the manila folder with red wax, the one fetched from chambers like contraband hope. Do not open unless they try to lie again, scrawled across it in Leon's hand. The same blunt pen that had signed birthday cards and resignations. The wax popped. The judge read in silence first, his face turning from pale to pained to something older. And then aloud. A letter laced with apology and iron. Lines that described forms pressed upon him in the name of peace, a father counseling. What's best for everyone when what was best for Leon was to be allowed to decide. A woman promising we'll keep it safe and meaning we'll keep it ours. And a final sentence like a door left on the latch. Screenshots, bank trails, voice memos. It's all on the drive. The USB emerged wrapped in a strip of flannel torn from a childhood blanket, and Mary made a noise in her throat that belonged to kitchens and plasters and late-night fevers. The screen filled with folders labeled with ordinary nouns that now felt like weapons. Logan's, hospice, calls, for them. The court watched a fraud alert call with the bank. Leon reading a suspicious IP address through a tired voice and not quite managing to keep the shake out of it. Listened to a phone recording in which Kody's whisper urged speed and Robin's reply cradled a sentence that sounded helpful until you heard its spine. He's not using it. Read a timeline where every unauthorized attempt had a timestamp. Every nocturnal visit had a footage clip, and in 3 separate stills, Robin stood by a bed with a folder on her palm, and the night nurse's log said nothing because the night nurse happened to be kin. Why was this never reported? Christine asked into the quiet, and the quiet answered by becoming colder. The judge's jaw set as though bracing each word before speaking it. When benevolence requires darkness, it ceases to be benevolence. He pressed play again, and the room learned what a slideshow can do when it refuses to be pretty. Account names dressed as foundations. Pine Mesa, Family Reconstruction Initiative, routing numbers kissing the same joint account Robin and Kody, had opened a fortnight after the funeral. Transfers walking tidy little steps from grief to convenience. Robin said family again and found the word had lost its magic. Kody said I wanted a way to provide and found that the bench had no patience left for alibis in pastoral tones. Outside, the steps had grown a crown of cameras. Inside, candles of attention burned without flame. The judge ordered immediate forensic supervision over Robin's finances and an audit net flung across 6 months of anything that moved. He asked whether there was anything else, and Dr. Adler, who had the practiced sadness of a person accustomed to being the last good witness, produced a small flash drive and explained that Leon had consented to one recorded session. For the record, because he had grown tired of the way silence edits a life. The lights dimmed, and on the wall a man everyone thought they knew sat upright in a beige chair and spoke like someone crossing a river, carefully, deliberately. I want my mother not to be afraid of Robin. I want my dad to admit that peace built on lies is a war with a nicer tablecloth. I want to be remembered for what I am, not for what they'll make me into when I'm gone. It ended without music, without theatrical fade. The room stayed dark a heartbeat longer than necessary, as though the building wished to honor the only coherence it had seen all day. When the lights rose, the judge's voice wore iron. The matter would be enlarged. Obstructive behavior would be referred. Devices would be surrendered or subpoenaed, and in 48 hours, sworn responses would be taken under caution. A murmur from the clerk. A new letter slid forward, unsigned save for an R, speaking of an alias fund called the Birch Project. The money moved to protect meaning rather than clutch it. Its name taken from a tree that grows back no matter how often you cut it down. Christine lifted a hand to her mouth because Leon had once told her that same story on a porch while the sun went about its evening business. Outside, posters were repainted from Justice for Leon to Let Leon Speak. Inside, Mary asked the judge, quietly, the way you ask for a final kindness, whether there was more, and received a folded square, a single line to Mum confiding courage and leaving love like a spare key under a brick. By afternoon, the protesters were singing, and the press were guessing. But the courtroom had lost its appetite for both spectacle and mercy. The judge called for the final hearing block and made a short speech about mirrors. He said that probate had become pathology, the study of how lies look in daylight, and announced that at the next sitting, Mr. Kody Brown would be sworn and examined, point by point against the record of his own omissions. For a moment, the room held still as a coin about to land. Kody, who had made a praxis of looking away, stared at the tabletop as if it might produce an exit, and Robin, barred from re-entry after her last eruption, haunted the corridors in whispers and rumors rather than footfall. Christine tightened her grip on the binder's memory, even as the physical thing rested. Janelle found a square inch of sleeve for Mary to hold, and the bench cleared with the slow shuffle of people, unlearning a language they had been forced to speak. The last to rise was Mary. She stood and looked at the witness box and imagined a son sitting there with a cheap paper cup of water in his hand and a throat raw from telling the truth too late. She did not cry because there are tears that belong to other rooms, and when she reached the steps, someone passed her a candle and she lit it without ceremony and without wish because she had learned, by letter, by ledger, by the bright cruelty of timestamps, that wishes are not plans. Night fell like a verdict no one had to announce, and in the dark glass of the courthouse doors, she saw herself and behind her, just for the briefest ache of a second, a boy smiling the way boys do when the storm finally moves off and she whispered, not a prayer but a promise, tomorrow you will be heard again. The courtroom the following morning did not feel like a hall of law so much as a vault where air itself had been rationed, each breath accounted for, each glance carrying weight. And when Kody Brown raised his right hand to be sworn, the temperature shifted by degrees only bodies could measure, because everyone present knew that this was not about legality anymore. It was about the anatomy of silence, about watching a man who had built whole rooms out of omission finally be compelled to speak. He wore no armor now, just a creased gray shirt with its sleeves rolled to forearms that trembled despite his attempts to anchor them. His hair tied back carelessly, his jaw hollow, and as the oath was read, his eyes flickered once toward Mary, once toward Christine, then back to the Bible as though he had discovered the pages were heavier than his wrist could bear. The judge's first question was perfunctory. Do you swear the statements you have given are truthful and accurate? And Kody answered no, the word arriving in the room like a dropped pane of glass, scattering everyone's composure. For it was the admission that every nod, every folded arm, every moment of muteness had not been neutrality, but deceit disguised as restraint. Christine stiffened in her chair. Janelle leaned forward as though pulled by a rope. Mary closed her eyes, color draining from her face, and the judge, unblinking, asked whether Kody had known about the offshore account, whether he had assisted Robin in opening it, whether he had been aware that Leon had revised his will to exclude them, and one by one Kody whispered, "Yes, yes I did," the syllables piling upon him like stones until his shoulders rounded and his spine seemed to collapse. Asked why he had participated, he muttered something about making it right later, about believing he could talk Leon into reversing it, about not thinking death would arrive so soon, and that last excuse landed in the gallery like poison because what is more damning than believing you have time to betray a son and repair it only after breath has left his body? Mary's voice sliced across the silence, not raised, but honed to a blade. You never said goodbye. You never came to hospice. You let her manipulate him while you stood in the doorway with your arms folded and your eyes shut. Kody stammered about Robin assuring him Leon was confused, that Leon would regret the changes, that the others had cut him off, and Christine snapped back that he had not wanted to know, that ignorance had been his shelter because it was easier to be silent than to be loyal. The judge pressed on, asking what was said during the night of the last transfer when surveillance placed him pacing Robin's living room. And Kody admitted that Robin told him Christine was about to be made power of attorney, that the estate would slip beyond them, that Leon had finally chosen others, and that he had encouraged her to act. No, he had not opened files himself, but yes, he had known. And no, he had not stopped her because he thought controlling the money might one day mend the family. And the judge's voice cracked across the benches with disgust. You thought stealing his wishes was the same as saving his legacy? That is not love, Mr. Brown. That is rewriting. Kody's eyes filled, but his lips never formed an apology, and Christine cried out across the aisle, voice breaking, "You could have loved him." That would have been enough. The judge then produced the final file from Leon's USB, and on the screen appeared a man translucent with illness, but still possessed of voice, whispering directly into the lens. Dad, if you're watching this, you didn't stop her. You stayed silent. That silence hurts more than cancer. You once said silence prevents war, but it built one inside me. I still love you, but I cannot forgive you. The room was paralyzed, Christine sobbing openly, Mary's fury folded into sorrow so tight it shook her frame, Janelle's face frozen, and Kody broke at last, tears streaming without words because there was nothing left for words to do. Mary rose, unsteady but resolute, and addressed the court with something between testimony and benediction. We are not here to carve what Leon left into pieces. We are here to prove who loved him enough not to lie to him, not to dominate him, not to disappear on him. He lost his voice. We muffled it. Some of us by manipulation, some by cowardice, but not anymore. From today, we speak for him. Even the judge lowered his gaze to collect himself before delivering the final judgment. Leon's will, lawfully altered, recognized in its integrity. Every attempt at fraud, diversion, coercion entered into record. Robin Brown referred for criminal investigation into financial fraud and digital tampering. Kody Brown held ethically accountable and ordered into deposition for complicity. And the estate, every last brick and pound and memory, transferred in its entirety to the Birch Project, the fund Leon had named in secret for children who knew too well the cost of being left unprotected. Christine wept with relief. Janelle clapped a hand to her mouth. Mary nodded as if the letter folded in her pocket had whispered finished. Outside the courthouse, candles multiplied, strangers chanting not slogans but Leon's name, the Birch. Project went viral overnight, donations cascading in, not for scandal but for salvation. And Kody emerged into the flashbulbs alone, no arm at his side, no family at his back, his name already condemned to footnotes and court reports. While Christine and Janelle planned to publish Leon's notebooks to fund the cause, and Mary lingered until the corridors were empty, touching the brass railings as though they carried his fingerprints, receiving from the judge in private a post-it folded into thirds with a line in her son's hand. Mom, I know you'll finish what I began. I'm not afraid anymore. She pressed it to her chest, and when she stepped outside into the night, someone gave her a candle and she lit it, whispering, "We heard you into the smoke," and the silence that answered was not oppressive anymore, but companionable, as though at last Leon had been allowed to lay his burden down. The wind shifted, the flags on the steps trembled, and somewhere, in whatever place truth goes once it has been spoken, a boy smiled, no longer erased, no longer silenced, but written into permanence by those who had finally chosen to listen.